Well, hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to show you my process on how to make river coasters. Here we go. So what you see me doing here is I am clamping down my wood to my mold. So when you're pouring epoxy, you always need a mold that you can pour it into, or you're going to make a giant mess. And that's exactly what I'm doing here. Is I'm actually clamping down some strips of melamine that are wrapped in Tyvek tape, so I can pop those off easily right before I do my pour. So I made the molds and I cut out the wood all off camera, and this is just me clamping everything down. So here I'm mixing up my epoxy. I'm adding the black diamond Caribbean blue color to this epoxy mix. I'm using the liquid glass epoxy on this one as well. The thickness is really thin. It's about ½ inch thick. So this is kind of overkill epoxy for this pour, but I really like the result of what comes out. So here, just adding that pigment in there, and I'm stirring it, mixing it really well, making sure I'm scraping the sides. And as you'll see, it mixes together really, really well. I really liked how that color turned out, and now it is pouring time. This is the most satisfying part, or maybe the second most satisfying part. I think the most satisfying part is always finishing your project, but here it's really it's really fun watching that epoxy kind of make its way down the mold into the wood. I mean, it really does look like a river at this point. It's really neat, fun process here. I usually let my epoxy projects set up 3 or 4 days longer if needed, and after they're all set up, then I take the mold off. So here I'm unscrewing the mold. They're all set together by screws and caulk and everything, and so that's what I'm doing is I'm demolding now. This is a fun part. Knocking these sides off is so satisfying. And there you can kind of see the caulk line that went up the melamine right there, and I'm kind of just ripping everything off that I can. These molds are reusable up to 2 or 3 times. They don't last forever, but it's a really awesome way to contain all the epoxy, and look how great that turned out. So now I try to plane everything down to the same thickness, and I'm just sending it through my planer. I leave the bottom of the mold intact because that's melamine and it's flat as flat can be. So I use that as my flat reference on the bottom of the planer, and then once the top is all fully planed down, I will remove the wood from the melamine and then send it through the planer a few more times on the opposite end. So here you see that I've still got that intact, and now I'm going to remove the melamine, the bottom of the mold, to see how it looks. So off camera, I sent it through the planer a few more times to get all the epoxy off the bottom. And here I'm on my crosscut sled, and I am taking it down to its final dimensions. So I always want to square off one edge before I start removing the bulk, and I've got a stop block there set up. So these are 4 inches by 4 inches wide. So here I'm cutting down the length 4 inches, then I'll turn it sideways and make sure it's 4 inches on the width as well once they're all cut down. Once everything is cut down, then it's sanding time. And usually when I sand this, I actually sand it and then cut it down, but I forgot to sand it, so I'm kind of doing some reverse steps here. You can't even tell though. So I always try to sand 80, 120, 180. I might even just go to 120 on these because they're coasters. They don't need to have a super smooth finish on them. So that's what you see me here doing. I'm just sanding again, flipping it over. So it's really important to break edges of wood. Doesn't matter if it's coasters or tabletop, and sometimes that means involving a planer. But here I just take my sanding block. I've got 120 grit sandpaper on there, and I just go through each edge and just making it smooth. Just break that edge just a little bit. You would be surprised how sharp those edges are. Even the corners. I'm breaking the corners a little bit and try to make it all consistent as possible. So now it's finishing time, and I came into my living room, so I got my son's trampoline in the back there, and I like using Odie's oil on everything that I use, and that includes these coasters. So I'm spraying the Odie's oil on there. I'm going to buff it in and buff it off, and that's the process that I'm doing here. So I'll let that sit and then come back off and buff all the excess oil off. And that's the finished product right there. How beautiful is that? Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.